We are in the middle of a robotics boom. New humanoid demonstrations are basically being posted every month, and every time the reaction seems the same. Humans are doomed. These things will replace us all and then kill us too. And it's easy to get caught up in that hype. But after watching dozens of these videos, I've come up with 5 questions you can ask to find out if they're really as impressive as they might seem at first glance. The first question I ask is probably the same that comes to your mind when you first see these things. How autonomous are they? How much of what I'm seeing is actually the robot deciding to do things and then doing them on its own? Or is there some Wizard of Oz hiding behind a curtain pulling all the strings? These days, it seems like it's pretty easy for most of these companies to make their robot have impressive movement. With the right simulation and hardware and training time, you can make a robot do backflips or kung fu or jujitsu or whatever else you think might look cool. But decision making is a lot harder. When I watch Atlas, I'm not really concerned with whether it moves perfectly smoothly, even though it's becoming smoother every day. What I'm looking for are the moments where it has to make a judgment. Does it adjust when an object isn't exactly where it expects it to be? Or can it deal with variation in the object? Color variation, size variation. Does it compensate when things aren't exactly as it was trained? Compare that to some of the smoother humanoid demos from companies like Unitree. The movement obviously looks incredible, but sometimes it's harder for me to tell how much of what I'm watching is reactive versus how much was pre-planned. And to be clear, in some of Unitree's demos, they're pushing and kicking these things like it's their damn stepchild. And that is autonomy, but that autonomy is about staying standing. It's not the same as deciding what it needs to do next. During these demos, try to think about whether you're watching one continuous shot or if there's a bunch of cuts every few seconds. If there are cuts, it doesn't necessarily mean the video's fake, it just means that we don't really know what happened between those cuts. Did they take a bunch of videos where the robot does a little bit correct every time and then splice those together? This might sound blunt, but I'm just not impressed by movement anymore. I'm impressed by independent decision making, and that's the first big filter with these demos. The second question I ask is, what is this robot actually doing? Is it doing something that people would really pay for? A vacuum is a lot more expensive than a broom, but people buy vacuums because they save time, so to them it's worth it. So when I see a robot demo, I'm asking, is this like a vacuum or is this just an expensive toy? When Boston Dynamics says that Atlas is designed to be a general humanoid replacement for repetitive work, that makes sense. Warehouses already spend billions on automation, so there's a real economic target there. Clearly, if these things can reliably reduce labor costs, they'll be widely adopted. That's just how automation works. Compare that to some of the humanoid demos you see, like these robots that are up on stage dancing at concerts. That might be technically impressive, but who's actually paying for that? Who cares enough to buy something like that? A robot that can do one flashy thing under lab conditions isn't necessarily valuable, but a robot that can reliably replace repetitive manual labor, that's different. So before I get excited over some new robot demo, I try to answer this question. Does the thing actually solve a real economic problem? Next, I ask, does the body actually make sense for the job? Why humanoid? Why not wheels? Why not a fixed arm? Why not 4 pillars like TARS? Look at a Roomba. It looks like a hockey puck. It's not trying to look like us, it's just shaped exactly like what the job would require. And it does that job very well. It wouldn't always make sense to replace a Roomba with a humanoid. Even though Boston Dynamics is mostly known for their humanoid robots, that's not all they do. Look at their stretch robot. It doesn't look humanoid, it's basically a mobile base with a powerful arm. For unloading heavy boxes in a warehouse, that's perfect. It's stable, it's efficient, and it's built specifically for that task. So when I see a humanoid robot doing something very simple, like moving objects in a flat warehouse, I have to ask, does this really require legs? Or is the humanoid form just making things unnecessarily complex? And to be fair, there are cases where humanoid form does make sense. Our world is built for humans. Stairs, ladders, narrow or cluttered hallways. A robot that can navigate that without needing a layout redesign has an advantage. And if you want a generalist robot that can do a bunch of different things, it makes sense to model it after one of the most adaptable designs we know, us. But if a simpler shape can do the job better, cheaper, or more reliably, that's usually the right engineering choice. So before I get impressed by how human a robot looks, I ask whether that shape is actually necessary, or if it's solving more of a marketing problem rather than an engineering one. My fourth question is, how did it actually learn to do whatever it's doing in that demo? Was it manually programmed, step by step, like a lot of older robots? Or was it teleoperated by a human? Maybe it was trained through simulations or through reinforcement learning. Because the training method tells us whether what it's doing is just a one-off trick or one of many possible demonstrations. When you look at Atlas, you shouldn't just be thinking about what it's doing right now. You should think about how transferable that capability is. In this video, we can see Atlas moving car parts from one spot to another. Okay, on the surface level, not super impressive, but if it can learn to move one piece around on its own, it can probably learn to move hundreds. And then all of a sudden, you're talking about automating an entire factory line. Training also tells us how the robot will deal with variation. If you change the object slightly or move things around, can it still deal with that, or does it just break? Some demos look impressive, but they're trained very specifically for one exact setup. That's fine, it's still progress, but it's not the same as a robot that can generalize. The real test is this. Could the robot learn something new tomorrow and then have a whole new demonstration available? Or would it need months of retraining and re-engineering? The difference between a demo and a platform is whether that system can expand. The final and arguably most important question I ask is, could this thing actually exist outside of the demo? Would it work in the real world? What does it cost per unit? Are we talking a robot that an average person could rent or buy realistically? Or are they only selling these things to the ultra-rich? Could a company realistically deploy this thing in their factories at scale? Or is it just a research prototype with a 6-figure price tag? How long does the battery last? Can it swap out its own batteries? What happens when something in the robot breaks? Who maintains it? Our world is unpredictable. Can it deal with environments like that? Wet floors, sharp edges, strobe lights, real people walking around. And maybe most importantly, is it safe? Not just safe in a lab, but safe around people who aren't expecting to encounter a big-ass robot. What about babies? What about old people in wheelchairs? A demo is a proof of concept. Real-world deployment is logistics, economics, safety compliance, maintenance schedules. If a robot only works under perfect conditions, sorry, it's not ready. It's just rehearsed. So those are my 5 questions. Autonomy, economic value, embodiment, learning, real-world deployment. If a demo can't pass most of those, I don't get too excited. Most humanoid robots today still fail at least 2 or 3 of these questions. That doesn't mean they're faking anything, it just means they're early. We're at the 3D TV early adopter stage when we all want to be at that $200 flat screen stage. So the next time you see a robot demo and the comments say, "This changes everything," run it through these 5 questions. Maybe you'll come to a different conclusion. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to see more. Like the video if you liked it, and dislike it if you think I was wrong. Once again, thank you.